So welcome to this panel. It's a very exciting panel with very interesting people that I introduce right now. The title of the panel is The Role of Academia in Innovation. And we have a very interesting panel with Dr. Ajit Singh, who is a general partner and managing director at Artiman Ventures, the illustrious Professor Peretz Lavie, who is the president of Technion after a very impressive career in the domain of sleep apnea and understanding sleep patterns, both in academia and having started successfully several companies, then was dean and then became president very successfully as well. I don't want to get into the details of it, A, because it's in the book, second, because we're going to use it in the panel. And I am the moderator, but I'm actually a participating panelist as well. And my background is also in entrepreneurship and having built companies and now being in venture. What is very interesting about this panel is you have three people with a PhD. I hope you recognize the quality of that.
Dangerous.
So you can call us Dr. Everything if you want. The second thing is we've all run companies. So that's, second capability. And we've all spent time at Technion, which will probably be more of a surprise when you look at Ajit than when you look at me. Now, what makes it even more interesting is Ajit really has an understanding of the landscape of innovation in India and what was possible there and what wasn't. Professor Lavie, of course, understands thoroughly the ecosystem, not only in Israel, which is, of course, the hotbed of startups as far as just after Silicon Valley, but has also been involved in setting up a very innovative center in New York, so he can talk about that. And I was born in Belgium. I understand the European scene and understand the US scene as well. So when we're going to be launching this conversation, we're going to go into a number of subjects, but they're all going to be tied up to the question of innovation and how academia is an essential layer in making innovation possible. And I'll start by making a statement to just throw the conversation into gear, which is a result of an exercise I did about 8 or 9 years ago in trying to understand why Israel is so successful, like Silicon Valley is, and other places that have tried to imitate have not succeeded. And the exercise consisted in taking Google Maps of the region of Silicon Valley and the region of Israel. And at the same scale, it turns out that the distance between Berkeley and San Jose is the same distance as between Haifa and Weizmann Institute. And that if you plot the top universities on both maps and you add to that the research centers of Int'l, HP, Cisco, you name them, you can almost remove the name of the cities, and at scale they are carbon copies of each other. But none of that starts like that. It ends like that. It always starts with academia as a foundation. And if in Israel there weren't prestigious high-level academic institutions like the Technion and others, there wouldn't have been Int'l and HP and Cisco, and they wouldn't be what we know today. So I'm going to make the conjecture that it all starts with academia, and then throw it maybe to you, Professor Lavie, to either contradict or add to that first statement.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. In fact, in the last I've just completed my 5th year as the president of the Technion. I joined the Technion in 1974 to the Faculty of Medicine. I was the Dean of Medicine, then a Vice President, and now I'm a President. And in the last year, I am asked again and again and again, what is the secret of Startup Nation? And what is the secret of the Technion? How come a country in a not such a friendly neighborhood with some vicious neighbors, and you see them almost every day now on TV, how come such a country producing so much innovation, The estimates now are that there are between 6,000 and 6,500 startup companies in Israel, between Weizmann and Haifa. And how come a small university in a very isolated part of the world is so successful? And I was asked, I'm going from here to Ottawa, another not such a safe place today, to address this question to the Association of Canadian University Presidents. And I thought about it, what make both Israel and the Technion so successful? In order to understand it, I think you have to follow the history of the university a little bit. You know, the Technion is the oldest university in this part of the world. The cornerstone was laid in 1912. The first class started in 1924. So we are celebrating now 90 years of education. And the reason that there was an engineering school in Ottoman Palestine was because at that time Jews couldn't study in Europe. There was no mos clausus. They couldn't study neither engineering nor medicine. So there was a decision to open a Jewish university. There was a mission for that engineering school. And if you take the history of the Technion from 1924 up to the present, you find that the concept of a mission is a common denominator across almost 90 years. And a world-class university, in my opinion, must have a sense of a mission. Must have a sense of a mission. So when in 1967, Charles de Gaulle imposed an embargo on Israel because of the outcome of the Six-Day War, the Technion decided to establish the Microelectronic Institute to produce the first semiconductors that were needed for infrared sensors and night vision, because we didn't have them. So the cliché that necessity is the mother of invention is not a cliché in such an environment. If you ask anybody from the high-tech sector in Israel when it all started, they say, oh, 1969, Microelectronic Institute in the Technion. The first class, Amos Vilnai, who is here, gave me the outline of the 1971 course in microelectronics from the Technion that he was an assistant at that time. So in the early 90s, when there was an influx of million Russians who come to Israel, 1 million Russians, the number of students in the Technion jumped from 6,000 to 8,000 in 1 year. And this was a tremendous, tremendous impact on Israel. So I think that one of the reasons is a sense of a mission. You serve something. You can serve your country, you can serve an ideology, you can serve mankind. You have a sense of a mission. And I will elaborate later on about it. I think that this is one issue. And the geography is helpful. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Haifa, Tel Aviv, and Haifa, Weizmann, and now Haifa, Beersheba, Ben Gurion is nothing. Compared to the traffic here, it's... So
you've never been around Tel Aviv at rush hour, have you?
Who go to Tel Aviv at rush hour? But take the Technion and draw a circle of 15 minutes drive and you find an R&D center of every major multinational company in the world. And our students spend more time in these R&D centers than in the classrooms, which is a problem in itself. So a sense of a mission, in my opinion, is one of the components of successful world-class university. And how this interact with other issues, I'll discuss later. Ajit.
Ajit, I'm sure there's people in India that are on a mission. I'm sure people, following the independence had dreams of successes and all that. And yet we've seen a successful establishment of international companies, but very little entrepreneurship. So great universities, great international companies, not so much innovation? What's the lesson?
So when you earlier asked the question, what comes first? It's a classic chicken and egg problem. So is it academia first or entrepreneurship first? Cannot answer the question. It's not answerable. What can be answered is that unless there's an ecosystem where both exist, there is no entrepreneurship. You can have entrepreneur, you can have innovation of academic nature, but unless the two coexist, there's no entrepreneurship. So let's take some examples. Let's contrast Silicon Valley with Boston, with San Diego, with New Delhi. So I'll take some examples. So Silicon Valley is the perfect analog of the islands of Galapagos. If you remember the talk I gave here about a year ago, so Galapagos is nature's platform for innovation, right? Nature creates so many species very quickly. Why? Temperature is right, the ocean currents bring all kinds of life, and the coral reefs mix them. And the new connections are made, new life is made. If it's sustainable, it passes on genetically. If it's not sustainable, it's discarded. And there's no punishment for failure, right? Silicon Valley, perfect. I mean, temperature is just about 98.6 as it needs to be. There is Starbucks, and there is ocean currents. I mean, we have people from Israel, we have people from India, we have China, you name it. So perfect ecosystem. And you have Stanford and Berkeley and San Jose State University and DeVry and you name it. And they're all needed, right? Ask yourself, is there an ecosystem like that elsewhere? Extremely rare. There's places where there is great universities, but no entrepreneurs. Hyderabad is an example. New Delhi is an example. Bangalore is an example. There are places where there are great entrepreneurs, but no universities. So look at Tokyo. Tokyo or Japan did extremely well from the 50s to the 80s. What happened after that? So the academia didn't keep up with the need of the entrepreneurship. So the answer really lies in ecosystem. And now coming to your point, India has failed in producing basic innovation. India has produced a lot of innovators. They come to America and innovate, right? When I came into this country in 1985, I was asked, what the American dream is? I said, tell me. He goes, American dream is, you finish your college, you go to Europe for a vacation, you come back, you marry your high school girlfriend, you buy a home in the suburbia, you have some kids and live happily ever after. And what's the Indian dream? Come to the America and you live the American dream, right? So India failed at producing basic innovation. Why? There isn't a place in India where the two things coexist. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. 70% of Indian economy, or 65, is cottage industry, small mom and pop show. But there's not enough universities or academia at the same location to have the cross-fertilization. And unless you have that transdisciplinarity, you see, first generation innovation can happen in individual disciplines, in physics, in chemistry, in biology. Second generation innovation requires transdisciplinarity. That you cannot achieve. So transdisciplinarity is key, first principles is key, and I guess ecosystem is what makes the chicken and egg come together.
So when you look at the role of university does a lot of things. They do research, they produce engineers, in the case of Technion, graduates in general, people that are ready to go work, and then they also produce PhD advanced people. I was at a meeting a few years ago, I'm not sure whether you were invited or we were speaking in your name, but a lot of the Israeli high-tech people were saying, don't do PhDs, we just need more engineers. And yet, we know that without advanced research, you don't advance. So between the different constituencies that are produced by the academia, which is which?
Let me take a step back, and I'd like to take your point regarding what is the ecosystem. In addition to necessity, the mother of invention, and the sense of a mission, I think there are certain cultural differences that prepare some systems and some societies for entrepreneurship innovation. I remember giving a talk in Japan, 2009. I gave a talk in Japan and I gave a talk in Korea. There were 1,000 students in the audience. And at the end of my talk, I asked, any questions? And you could cut the air, silent still. Nobody dared to raise his hand.
Absolutely. Let me interrupt you. No, just kidding.
Let me answer your question.
He knew what I'm going to say next. In the Technion, before you finish your first sentence, let me interrupt you, dear Professor Lavie. You don't know what you are talking about. I won't mention the name of the university, but I have a dinner with a very famous president in the Far East. And he asked me, during dinner, Professor Lavie, how many students commit suicide every year in the Technion? And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? He said, how many students commit suicide? I said, the only student I remember was when I was a dean of medicine in the 90s, and this was a traumatic event. And he told me that in his university, between 3 and 5 students every year, because they cannot tolerate failure. So the issue of aversion from failure, the readiness to take risks, the social distance, these are issues that are critical for innovative societies and non-innovative societies. And you have to combine them with all the other factors. And I think here, at least with respect to the Indians and the Israelis, there are similarities.
Can I interrupt you now?
Absolutely.
So brilliant thought. So there's actually, I'll build on that. There are 2 related parameters that are extremely important. First of all, the culture has to be non-hierarchical. When there's hierarchy, you don't have an egalitarian exchange of views. So there's no dialogue. So a dialogue happens when 2 people have genuine curiosity in the other person's viewpoint. So listen to the words. It has to be genuine. It has to be curiosity. I can listen to you out of generosity. I'm this big guy who's generous to you. It has to be curiosity. And I have to be interested in your viewpoint, what you're trying to say, not what you're saying, but what you're trying to say. So I have to draw it out of you. I have to invest the effort. So hierarchy kills it. If there's no hierarchy, you can have an egalitarian system. Second is poor listening skills. I mean, I grew up in India, and I still haven't learned good listening skills. I mean, the only time I listen is when I'm with my wife, because I'm told to listen. Yeah. I think I listen. Thank you, exactly right. So poor listening skills are deep in the system, probably because you're never allowed to talk. Your hierarchy is so strong that when you get a chance, you are waiting for that 1 picosecond gap in somebody's talk, and you're ready to fire the gun. Those 2 things are massive disablers of dialogue that fills that ecosystem.
I remember I gave a talk in Seoul, and they asked me to come a week before to spend time with students. Because again, the issue of a professor and a student is so built into the DNA that they cannot break it.
Cannot break it, yeah. Yeah.
So let's try and get back to my question.
And engineers. It's interesting. The trend is reversed. We got requests and complaints now from the high-tech sector of industry why you don't produce more PhD in electrical engineering, computer science, because we need these people. You need the person that having a sense of how to work independently, how to ask the right questions, how to design an experiment. And you're absolutely right. 10, 20 years ago, more engineers. Now they're pushing us to produce more PhD students. And this is a problem because a PhD student, the support of a PhD student, it's a full fellowship if you'd like him to concentrate on his work. So there is a change, and I think we slowly adapt to this change.
So I hear you, and then let me contrast that with some voices in Silicon Valley that say you don't even need to finish undergrad.
That's nonsense.
I was in Italy in the Ambrosetti Symposium. I don't know if you heard about the Ambrosetti Symposium.
But it sounds great.
It's in a place that if there is something from heaven on earth, this is the place, Lake Como. There were 2 from Israel, Shimon Peretz and myself. And Bre Petis, you know, it's Bre Petis. He gave a speech why, and he tried to convince the audience, you shouldn't send your children to university. It's a waste of time. Which for me was, a challenge, and I truly believe that this is nonsense, totally nonsense. The number of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates out there is so small that the majority of us still need to go to university, and to do a PhD is even better than to have just an engineering degree.
I hate it when you ask a question whose answer I wanted to give without the question.
Yeah, no, I actually do want the answer to the question, which is, you know, so should everybody get a PhD, or does actually academia need to produce that mix of both engineers and PhDs and advanced research? Are all the components needed? And I think leading to that is, at which point do you start the interaction between academia and industry? One of my great experiences is, hey, I spent the end of my last year at Technion actually designing a piece of the 8087 at Int'l, right? So, you know, I got into the workforce having done something. How do you massage that with both, you know, the undergrad, the grad degree, the experience with industry? Maybe to you, Ajit?
So, you know, first I should totally agree and endorse. I mean, what you're saying is, it completely makes sense. So I would have used slightly stronger words than sheer nonsense. So I know I'm being recorded. I'll say it's complete bullshit. Absolute. I mean, nonsense doesn't even begin to say. You're basically taking a child who has a lot of learning ability. I mean, your synapses are being formed at that age. The more people you're exposed to, the longer the period of time you're exposed to, you're building the network. You're creating an ecosystem in your own mind. And our friends in the Valley, some of them, are saying, let's stop that process. Okay? So what should I call it? I mean, it's counter-evolutionary, if anything, right? Stupid. Okay. Now, that said, there is some virtue to knowing when to stop and what to do next. So now, to just build a little bit, the value academia brings the most is, while doing PhD or not doing it, studying engineering or science, that's a personal choice. But what is not a personal choice is learning to use first principles. Yeah, if I could give away a soundbite, learning to use first principles. If you allow me, I'll use one example. I ask a question often. The sales of Encyclopedia Britannica in 1995 was about $600 million. In 2005, it was zero. 50 million, you can round it up or down. Why? What happened? Response? Wikipedia, internet. And I say, that's not using first principles. That's a dogmatic response by template matching. We are so rooted in our experience. Let's think about it for a second. People buy Encyclopedia Britannica, did. Any of you bought it at home? Any of you? Any of you old enough to have bought Britannica? Oh gosh, like people are honest. Okay, how many times did you open it? Be honest. Per year.
One,
twice. So average number of time was once, right? Or not Britannica, any good encyclopedia in paper form. Many times. 10,000 times per day? But no, a year.
There are outliers.
But it's very decorative on the word.
Thank you, we don't have liars, but we do have outliers. So now people buy Britannica because they did some little user survey to figure out they buy Britannica for two reasons. Number one, it looks good on shelf, okay? And number two, they buy it for their children, or they bought it for their children. So Britannica was a $1,500 parental guilt mitigation device for two-income families, right? Now ask yourself, what else happened that was a $1,500 guilt mitigation device for parental two-income families? PC in year 2000. So internet did not kill Encyclopedia Britannica. PC did. You could see the sales of Britannica going down and sales of PC going up. By the way, it so happens that now that we do have internet, we do Google search 10, 15 times, 100 times a day sometime. So it's Google or internet or Wikipedia did not supplant Britannica at all. It was an independent phenomena that happened and allowed us to do reference without being academics who go to libraries. That's the power of first principles thinking. And that you do not learn anywhere else. That you learn by being exposed to multiple people. And actually what stands you in good stead, I mean, Artiman has a great philosophy. When you walk through our door, please leave what you know behind. So we have to kind of almost detoxify you and say, now let's think from first principles. Let's solve a basic problem of society, but think from first principles. Don't bring dogmas of templates. That's what you cannot learn anywhere other than by staying at a university 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 100 years.
So I think, you know, just to try and continue on that and expand, you know, one of the elements of academia is also as a formative body for society. It's the place where people meet. It's the place where people hang out. And to most of us, it's the place where we make the best friends we will ever make. One of them in the room. Because you're at that age, because you're at that place in society. So I'd like to get you guys to talk a little bit about that, and I'll go with Ajit first, because I know you want to talk about that, and then expand it to the role of a university in training the rest of society to join the middle. But let him start first, because I know you have a
great question. What a great question. So there's a book from the, mid-80s. It's called Interactive Excellence. It's by Edwin Schlossberg, who happens to be Caroline Kennedy's husband. So this guy says children learn fast. They are in the fastest learning segment of society. And the natural phenomena is, well, children are young, they're impressionable, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the only reason. Because they are the only group of society who meets physically as a group on a regular basis. It helps in multiple ways. It conditions you. It also, if you know neuroscience, it also neurologically helps you, right? You're constantly making new synapses by number of observations you have during the day. So that role that's played by being in a group of like-minded people studying like-minded things, studying similar things, and meeting as a group on a physical basis only happens in school or later in academia and the university. You cannot take that away. I mean, that's, as you said, formative is the right word. That's where your network is being created. That's where your neurons develop more and more synapses. And you should, I mean, it's almost criminal to inhibit that. I'll stop there.
Well, as I said, a sense of a mission is essential for university. And one of the aspects of the Technion, at least, is a form of education that we call pre-academic. Pre-academic education, we take groups from society that didn't have the privilege of completing high school and having the credentials to be accepted to the Technion. I'll give you two examples. One, ultra-Orthodox Jews throughout their life study one thing, Talmud. That's it. Nothing else. Nothing. No mathematics, no history, no literature, nothing but Talmud. There are 100 of them studying in the yeshiva, Talmud. Arab minorities in Israel, some of them, some of the schools are very poor, very low level. They are weak, particularly in mathematics and in English. So the Technion in the pre-academic program took upon itself to close the social gap, particularly of groups like the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab minorities. We take the ultra-Orthodox kids to the Technion, kids that are 24-year-old with 4 children when they come to the Technion. And I will describe to you the response to the first 5 minutes of the first class in mathematics. The teacher put on the blackboard 1, 2, 3, 10. 10 equal X. And he raised his hand and he said, teacher, I understand 1 to 10, but what are the 2 ones that cross each other? I don't understand. This kid is now second year master student in industrial engineering and management. Wow. He didn't know how to divide 36 by 6 when he started the 18-month program. After 18 months, he's doing differential equations, accepted to the students. We do not believe in an affirmative action. There is no affirmative action. No affirmative action. Arab minorities. 10 years ago, 8% of the students in the Technion were Arab minorities. Dropout rate after 1 year, 40%. 40%. 85% of them were in one faculty, civil engineering. 10 years later, after we have a structured program to bring them before trying to be accepted to the Technion to a pre-academic program of 12 months, 20% of the students are Arabs, equal distribution across all faculties, dropout rate, the same as the general dropout rate in the Technion. So university can play a role in changing the fabrics of society. There is no doubt about it. Every year we have 700 kids in the pre-academic program. 67% of them across the years are accepted to the Technion without affirmative action. And it's interesting, I had a very distinguished president of an American university who came to see the pre-academic program, and he told me, Peretz, you know, you changed my ideology. I was told that if I miss the inner city kids at the age of 9, forget them. You won't be able to change them. And here I see 24-year-old men who didn't know how to divide 36 by 6. After 18 months, he's a student in industrial engineering and management. So universities have a role, and universities can affect society. Let me move now to New York, because what we did in New York is something which touched to the issue of how much collaboration between industry and academia there should be. I don't know how many of you know, but the Technion started a research institute in New York together with Cornell. The story started at the end of 2010 when Mayor Bloomberg said in a letter, written black and white, I'm envy of the Silicon Valley and Route 128 in Boston. I'd like New York to be the technological capital of the world. And I'd like to establish a new university that will educate engineers to help the economy of New York, and invited the Technion to participate. We hesitated, but then we submitted a program of 3 different hubs connected with a common denominator of big data. The city gave $100 million and free land in Manhattan. The problem is they wanted matching to the $100 million. We told the city we cannot match $100 million. They say, forget it. Submit your proposal, we'll take care of the money later. Lo and behold, there were 53 universities participating. The leading university was Stanford. Everybody thought that Stanford will take it. And second stage, 18 universities. And then we became worried. Where are we going to get the $100 million? To cut a very long story short, we teamed up with Cornell. We submitted the proposal. They adopted our proposal. And we won the competition. And the concept is new, completely new. This is going to be a new degree that was approved by the state of New York, a master in applied science and engineering. And every student will have 2 mentors, from the academia and from industry. And the industry will be not at the periphery of the campus, on campus. And this is a completely new program. I called it the sandbox program because whatever is going to be successful will adapt. We have, for instance, we called it a runway postdoc programs. We bring people for a postdoc position, not those that would like to be academicians, those who would like to start their own companies. And we provide them the ecosystem on campus. We started with 6, 3 Israelis, 3 Americans. 5 of them, after 1 year, have a company. And now we double it. The first class just started. So this is something that usually universities are afraid to do, because applied research always is looked upon as a second-rate research. And here we decided that this is going to be applied research. I believe that this applied research will also generate, no doubt about it, basic research. And we are up and running. The campus will be ready in 2017 on Roosevelt Island. And the first class just started a few weeks ago.
Thank you. I know we have another 10 minutes. You don't have to clap yet. I just want to know if there will be questions from the audience. I'm happy to actually keep going. We have lots to talk about, but I want to give room to the audience as well. Sure, because we have only 8 minutes left.
So I think you can both address this question. I've been here for about a year in my master's at Berkeley, and I know you must both be troubled by the and I'd love to know your take on how you each cope or would like to see your countries cope with the draining of wonderful minds.
What's your name?
I'm Gali.
Gal. My daughter,
Gali.
Gali. My daughter is also Gali. I'll give you my short answer because I have a whole lecture about globalization of academic education. My short answer is, you know what is 001? This is the night flight from Tel Aviv to New York. You know what's 008? This is the night flight from New York to Tel Aviv. And I'll give you two examples. I have a partner. We started a company together. His name is Giora Yaron. Giora Yaron was here in the Silicon Valley, worked for National Semiconductors, and he wanted to go back. So he came to National and they said, how can we convince you to stay in the company? He said, oh, give me an R&D center in Israel. And they gave him. Int'l, how did Int'l start in Israel? The same way. Vilensky, Dan Vilensky, Applied Materials. The world is global. Flights going from Tel Aviv, New York, go from New York to Tel Aviv. And I truly believe that the Rabin concept, and I'll say it in Hebrew, Nefolet shel Nemoshot, this is no longer valid. So I don't think there's a brain drain. In New York, by the way, it's amazing. Everybody blame me. You are going to cause a brain drain from Israelis to New York. We have 3 faculty members that join JTCII, Jacobs Technion Cornell Institute. 2 of them had fathers who graduated from the Technion in the 70s and moved to the United States. Their children are now making half aliyah to New York. So this is my answer.
Yeah, let me add to that. I think, and I'm a good example of that. There's nothing more powerful for university than to have graduates all over the world in positions that have an influence. There's nothing that reinforces the university as much as knowing that when you need a link somewhere else, there's somebody that cares that's attached to the university, whether it's for money or for relationship or for whatever. And so I would add that dimension. Even if people don't come back, the network stays the network, and the bigger the network is, the better. So don't worry about it.
Can I add to that? So agreed with both points. The world is extremely flat, so a la Thomas Friedman, so there's no question about that. Brain drain is also happening the opposite direction. So America severely lacks good physicists. We can no longer make our own linear accelerators. We have to make it in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe. So that problem. But let's go a step further. I still don't worry about it. I give you a very real example of a cross-innovation between India and the United States. So at Artiman, we have a philosophy of looking at 2 parameters, solve a very bold societal problem, and do it with transdisciplinarity. We believe it's absolutely needed. So the problems we address are actually old world boring problems: agriculture, manufacturing, construction, healthcare. So I repeat, agriculture, manufacturing, construction, venture-backed construction, and healthcare. Example, there are 17,000 pathologists in the US. There are only 800 in India. Okay, 1,000,002 people, 800 pathologists. Of the 1,000,000,000 people, 200 million can pay for anything you can name. Name something. Trip to Mars. Okay, maybe not 200 million, but 2 million can pay for it. So there is enough people who have power to pay. The need for healthcare is universal, but there's not enough pathologists. So here's where transdisciplinary technology comes to play. A founder of ours, an entrepreneur in India, a 24-year-old young lady, sociology major, said, let me do digitization of pathology slides in India, find pathologists of Indian origin in the United States who are experts, MD, PhDs in sarcoma and other things, and let them read those slides digitally overnight. While it's overnight in India, day here. So actually, they produced a better quality because they have the access to experts. They did it quicker than it'll be normally done because while you're sleeping, it's being read here. Ultimate example of bringing healthcare, cancer diagnostics, scanning technology, software, cloud, and collaboration in one umbrella. So that's the power of even utilizing brain drain to your benefit.
I have only one caveat to what I said before, and this is the second generation. Here, it's up to the parents to make sure that the children are still linked with the old country. And this is something which is very problematic, as I can say.
Other questions? I have one more question, which is the evolution of universities as being more inclusive of society, and specifically along the lines of enabling women to get into a more engineering position and then get into
Beautiful.
Position in the industry as well.
Well, the story of women in the Technion is unique and very few knows about it. You know, the money to build the Technion, the first gift came from Moscow. The tea merchant, Kalonimus Vysotsky, gave 100,000 ruble. Why? Because Echad Ha'am worked for the Vysotsky family. He's one of the Zionistic leaders, and he went to Moscow and convinced him. But like all planning, the money was enough for half of the building. Lucky for us, there was a banker from New York by the name of Jacob Schiff, and he visited Palestine. He saw the building, and I said, I'm ready to give the money on 3 conditions. 1, remove the name Vysotsky from the name of the school. Otherwise, we would be the Vysotsky Technion. Second, you accept to this school students, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religious, and political views. At that time, Oxford had a separate college for women, and women couldn't get a degree. And here is somebody who gave money, provided that they accept women. And the first class was 1 woman, 16 men studying building engineering and architecture.
My class felt like that too.
That's the problem. We identify the issue of a postdoc as the major for women along their academic career. To be accepted in the Technion or in any good university in Israel to an academic position, you have to go out. You have to spend 2, 3, 4, in life sciences, sometimes 5 years in a good university in order to beef up your CV. Women cannot do it because their husband is working in the high-tech sector. He doesn't want to leave the job. And this is a major obstacle that we try to deal with in different ways, like allowing a postdoc inside Israel in kind of a compromise that the Weizmann is at least as good as Stanford. But in the Technion right now, the number of student women